I want to start out with a quote. This is a quote from Tony Robbins. And it says, "It's absolutely the most exciting time to be alive, and yet the pressures of modern life have turned disappointment and emotional discomfort into a habit. Stress into a lifestyle. Instant gratification into an addiction. In fact, all of that has become addictions." He says habit, he says lifestyle, but many of this has become an addiction. He continues, "But like most everything in this world, pain has its purpose. Pain is a red flag calling us to action. Massive action is the cure-all." So like Gary said, and like you might have read in the e-blast, my talk title is "Suck It Up, Pal." And this is not, as some of you may understand, an Emma Curtis Hopkins kind of talk. Now, for those who don't know, Emma Curtis Hopkins was one of the leaders of New Thought, and she taught Ernest Holmes, and she taught the Fillmores that began the Unity Church organization, and many others, and she ordained 100 or so ministers, most of which were female. This is in the early 1900s, the very early 1900s actually. And there's folklore that says when people would come to her for counseling or practitioner work, you may understand that term more, she would basically have them sit down, and she always wore a pillbox hat, evidently, and was always dressed, very nicely, like in her Sunday best every day at the office. And they would come in and they would sit down and they would go, "Well, Reverend, and they'd get about 3 words in, and she goes, "Okay, I've heard enough, you're healed, get out." Now, funny sounding and a little brusque sounding, but they would be healed because her belief was so intense. But then I realized, but that's not what this talk is really about. I'm not going to Emma Curtis Hopkins you. I realized I sort of spelled it wrong in the e-blasts. The "it" part of "Suck It Up, Pal" should have been all caps. And I'm not talking about "it," the clown from the Stephen King novel or the movie. I'm talking about the thing itself. The thing itself. God. Because graceful living is spirit-infused living. Now, Gary thought I was going to be the bad cop kind of thing in this, and I'm just the opposite. Because I want us to rethink and reconnect into that which is unseen. Because, most of what's happening in the universe is unseen. And I don't mean like atoms, because you can see atoms through certain microscopes, and you could see cells in our bodies which we can't really see by the eye through certain types of microscopes. But you can't see gravity. You can't see magnetism. You can't see electricity. You only see the effects of those things. There's evidence, there's results because of them being present, but you don't actually see what does gravity look like. And this is happening in nature. It's something that we feel. Not emotions, something we feel. When you read like Celtic spirituality, or you read like many of the mystics like Francis of Assisi, Meister Eckhart, I've quoted him a lot, Teilhard de Chardin, Ralph Waldo Emerson, I use him a lot, Hildegard von Bingen, of course, Dr. Holmes. When you read those mystics or hear what those mystics have said, you get a feeling that attaches you to the divine. It stops you for a moment. When you hear poetry by Rumi or Hafez and many other poets, but especially those two, because they were really into this divine connection and how nature shows the divine connection. When you read that stuff, your connection gets tighter with nature and with spirit, with it. And it becomes sort of a sacred mission. And I realized that, yesterday morning, Hattie and I were meditating before she went off to work, and I realized after I meditated, it was just short, it was like 10 minutes that we meditated. We didn't meditate for very long in the scheme of things. So much came out of me to rush to figure out some things that I couldn't quite get about what I wanted to do today. You know, I had all these plans, and I had the talk title, and I had the talk starting to go, but those 10 minutes to just step back and reveal the divinity in me, things started coming up that I started getting what I wanted to say, even though I knew intellectually what I wanted to talk about today. I want to read you a story, quick little story, by Mark Nepo. He wrote this book, 7,000 Ways to Listen. And I want to read you a little story, and it's kind of similar to the meditation I did this morning, in a way. But let me read you just this paragraph that he writes about. He was in Nova Scotia visiting some friends, and they went on a nature walk. And he says, so off we went on a fall day down the path from his garden into the woods, stepping over briars and clearing broken limbs till we got to the fallen cherry. Now he's talking about a cherry tree that his friend had told him about that had fell. We walked the length of that majestic tree and cut some logs, then walked deeper into the woods. My muscles were sore, but good sore. I couldn't stop smiling. As our feet were stepping down twigs, George said, when a tree is very young, it's covered with limbs. But as it grows older, most of its limbs die and break off. We stopped by a mature oak, and I put my hands on the bark of this very old, straight tree, light flooding its length, and felt the wisdom of its years. It struck me squarely. Trees in the forest start out reaching for the light and end up standing in the light. Once standing in the light, there is less need to reach. Isn't that amazing? So our sacred mission is to stand in the light, to not reach, to not struggle to attach ourselves, to reattach ourselves, to become aware of, however you want to put it, with the thing itself, with it. We just need to open ourselves to hang out with the divine. It doesn't need to be a big production. Lights don't need to flash, and big music doesn't need to come up. It can be a quiet, just hanging out with a friend where you don't even have to talk. You just know. Hildegard von Bingen, of course, I'll bring her up. She said, you understand so little of what is around you because you do not use what is within you. Living a graceful life has so little to do with money, success, education, knowledge. It's an inside job. And I want to reiterate us to get into that inside job, to listen to the call of the soul. This is something I got out of this book earlier in this chapter that I was reading. Mark Nepo was talking about the soul's calling versus the call of the soul. So your soul's calling may be something similar to a purpose. Your purpose in life. What is, like I'm called, and many of us are called to be minister or to minister in one way or another. But that's your soul's calling. That's not the soul calling. That's what you're sucking up to now. You're sucking up to the call of the soul. The call that invites you to connect. So I have a question for you. You don't have to answer out loud because it might be embarrassing. Do you ever doubt your own achievements? Do you ever feel like you're fooling yourself and everyone around you that you're not really qualified to do what you're doing, whether other people know it or not? Now that happens to all of us. It puts us in a mindset of restriction. We get very restricted by that. We're in a box of limitation because we're already limiting ourselves by believing that junk, that we're somehow not qualified. And we enter a gated community of sameness because it usually stays around, that feeling, once we allow it to take hold. Or maybe you're an overachiever. Any of you overachievers? Because a lot of overachievers are just inside, they're afraid to fail, is what's going on. They work themselves hours and hours and hours, sometimes into very bad health. Most of the time they're very unhappy, even though they don't appear that way. But you can see it in their eyes, you can see it in the fake smile. And they never really progress. They seem to progress. Society may even say they progress. Or sometimes overachievers, they just have a million projects and they just walk away because they have a fear they'll never be able to do it well, that they'll fail, so they just walk away from it. They barely even try. Now, if any of those sound familiar, you're suffering from what is called imposter syndrome. A recent study in the International Journal of Behavioral Science, I know you all get that. It's every quarter, in case you don't get it. In that journal, it said about 70% experience symptoms of that syndrome. You ever need, here's one I get, as Patty sees much too often. Do you ever feel the need to do everything yourself? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You feel that you feel deep inside, it may not up here, but if you sat down and thought about it, you probably feel that if you don't do it all yourself, you must somehow be some sort of incompetent fraud. That's called the Lone Ranger syndrome. Hi-ho, silver, away! I've had that. It's dumb. It's dumb to not seek out your allies for help. It's dumb not to employ somebody who could do it better than you. It's dumb. When we take massive action, when we step into our sacred mission, we start patterning our thoughts. We start nurturing our self-esteem, and we start building the confidence we need to get past this imposter syndrome or anything like it. And doing that, we are sucking it up, pal. We're sucking in our authentic self. Not our past behaviors, not our IQ, not our talents, not our history especially. We're sucking in that uniqueness, that individualization that we are, that we express, our spiritual DNA, you might say. Now you may say to me in your head, well, Rev J, the universe is ignoring me, look at my life. And I would say, well, you know what, you're right, actually it is, in a way, ignoring you because you're telling it to ignore you, in a way. Nobody actually says in their brain, universe, ignore all these wonderful things I've decided to bring into my life. But we are telling it something, and it is bringing it to us in perfect right order. So sometimes we also get immersed in doing, in problem solving. And when we get into problem solving, that means we're not listening. We're not listening to the universe where the divine intelligence is, way beyond the intelligence, and I bow and honor to anybody's IQ and knowledge in various aspects. But if you don't listen to the divine intelligence, problem solving tends to get us into a mental chaos. You ever feel that? Oh my gosh, I got to do this. How do I do this? And you get crazed and anxious. And it doesn't mean you finally reach the the idea that will solve the condition you're in, but you go through all this agita to get there. Instead of focusing on the problem, if we would just take a reflective pause, and it doesn't even have to be multi-minutes, just a reflective pause to breathe and focus on, at the very least, what's going well right now. What is thriving in your life versus this momentary condition, this experience that you're having that you feel like you need to solve? In the state of gratitude, fear and anxiety start to melt away. They diminish, and answers start showing up. Now you also may say, well, you know what? Things are going well, but oh God, what's around the corner? That's scary. I don't know what's next. I don't know what the government's going to do, what my mate is going to do, what's happening at you never know what's going to happen. That saboteur that we all invite in somehow is fear. Now I'm going to read you a quote, and part of it you've heard before, but I'm going to read the entire quote, which you don't hear very often, and this is the famous FDR quote. But listen to all he said in that sentence. So first of all, let me assert my firm belief that the only thing we have to fear is fear itself. Nameless, unreasoning, unjustified terror which paralyzes needed efforts to convert retreat into advance. Fear is living in a future. Fear is living in a future that you're going to invite. Do you want to invite those kind of fearful futures into your life? Of course not. Now let me repeat again what Tony Robbins says. It's absolutely the most exciting time to be alive, and yet the pressures of modern life have turned disappointment and emotional discomfort into a habit, stress into a lifestyle, instant gratification into an addiction. But like most everything in the world, pain has its purpose. Pain is a red flag calling us to action. Massive action is the cure-all. Pain, my friends, is fear. Pain is impatience. Pain is doubt. Pain is anxiety. And the massive action we need to take is starting with intentionally connecting with our heart, with our soul, with the divine, with nature, with that creative force, the Big Bang in the universe. Because as we fall deeper and deeper into our true self, or you may say into your truer self if you feel like you're pretty authentic, you'll be lifted up. We all will be lifted up and guided towards a healthier, happier, more intelligent, and more joyous life. We'll receive a deeper understanding that the power within, not anything out here, not your boss, not your mate, not your friends, not even this organization. The power within is far greater than any condition or any circumstance that comes your way. And I mean anything. Anything. So we have to sit down. We have to get quiet. We have to breathe and meditate or pray or use the affirmation card or just open up, whatever that means to you. Read some of the mystics and allow Spirit to speak to us. We gotta suck it up, pal. The words of wisdom, let it be you. And so it is. Namaste.
So it is.
Thank you so much. Thank you.